Probably wouldn't be a good drunk one just because you have to stir.
I think I've only made this drunk.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a great drunk one because you can't mess it up. Hi, Sohla here in the New York Times cooking studio, and today we're going to be talking all about pasta, spaghetti specifically. We're going to show you how to take one box of pasta and make 3 really awesome, easy recipes. If you can boil water, you can make these, but we're going to take it beyond that. We're going to level it up. Take your pasta, you know, to the next level. The first pasta we're gonna make is a grated tomato pasta. So it's basically a pasta pomodoro. Pomodoro just means tomato. It's best to make this in the summer when you have amazing heirloom tomatoes. And it's really easy because we're just gonna grate our sauce, cook our pasta, and bring it together. The secret to bringing it together is just knowing how al dente to cook the pasta, because we wanna finish cooking it in that tomato so that it can kind of like absorb that fresh juicy tomato sauce. First off, we're gonna get our pasta going. This is really fast. Like by the time the pasta's cooked, we're pretty much there. So we've got our big pot of boiling water. We used to always say back in the day that you need a giant pot of water to boil pasta, but that's actually not true. You can boil your pasta in whatever amount of water it'll cover it in, but when you use less water, you just have to get in there and stir more frequently for even cooking. You can actually cook it in a skillet with just enough water to cover, but then you just have to be like on top of it stirring, otherwise it's gonna clump and cook unevenly. So choose your adventure. So we're gonna salt our water, and it's really important to taste your pasta water. It's gonna be really gross, and you need a lot more salt than you think, because putting salt on it afterwards, it's only gonna season the outside. You wanna season the pasta from the inside. And I know that looks like a lot of salt, but you need it. Most of the salt's going down the drain. It's not going into your pasta. You need to just start heavily salted. Not as salty as the sea, but like when you have a sip, it should be unpleasant, kind of kick you in the throat. We did it. Okay, so this recipe uses 12 ounces of pasta. I know a box has 16 ounces. 1 pound of pasta is kind of a lot, and you don't need a scale. It doesn't have to be super precise. Let me show you. You can do this. You go, that's a full box, and then you go, that's a half a box, and then that's half of that, and then you got 12 ounces. It's a much easier amount of pasta to manage when you're starting out, and I think you are gonna have some leftover pasta, but you know in here you've got 4 ounces, so that's like a nice snack, or next time you wanna make this, get just a half a box and throw this in there. You'll figure it out, it's easy math. So once you add your pasta, you wanna just stir it occasionally until it comes back up to a rolling boil. Once it's back up to a rolling boil, you really don't have to worry about it. And in the meantime, we're gonna prep our sauce. And it's a super easy grated tomato sauce. We're gonna start with these heirloom tomatoes. You can also use beef steaks, and we're gonna grate them. The recipe says to use 4 large tomatoes. This isn't even a large tomato. This is like a jumbo, gigantic tomato. So I would count this as 2 tomatoes. We're just gonna trim off a little bit of skin right here, and that's just gonna allow it to be easier to grate. We're gonna give the grater something to grip onto. So we're gonna grate this until we just have the skins left. Now keep an eye on your pasta. We really want it to be very al dente here. We wanna make sure it finishes cooking in the sauce. What al dente means is you want it to be a little bit white at the core. You want it to be a little bit undercooked. So you can see this is very juicy and watery, and that's why it's, whoa. That's why it's especially important to make sure that your pasta doesn't get overcooked, because you want it to be able to absorb all this juicy liquid. Uh-oh, I wasn't stirring. We have some clumpage. It's okay. We can get in there, break it up. We'll survive. These tweezer tongs, they're also like perfect for gripping just one strand of pasta. I don't know if you've gone in this journey into a pot with a pair of big clacky tongs. We're almost there. I actually think I want to drain it. I'm going to drain this in the sink, then we're going to come back and continue grating our tomatoes. Another big pitfall when you're making a simple pasta like this is how you grate your cheese, and I feel like we don't talk about it enough. I love my microplane grater for a lot of stuff, like if I want to get really mushy garlic, but microplaned cheese is way too fine to emulsify properly into a pasta. It always ends up clumping. It's just so fine. It melts way too fast, And the key to emulsifying something is it needs to melt at kind of a moderate speed. Or if you are making like a lot of pasta, it's really great to put it in a food processor, pulse it until it's nice and crumbly. Even the blender, break your cheese up into chunks, pulse it in the blender, and then you get like a really nice little pebbly texture. Like if you buy pre-grated cheese, it's kind of a pebbly texture. And that's perfect for emulsifying. Our pasta is gonna hang out in the colander. We're going right back into this pot over like medium-high heat. There's a lot of olive oil in this, and that's like really important to the flavor. This is such a simple pasta that you need the olive oil and you need the garlic. And we're not looking for any color. We just wanna like flavor the olive oil with the garlic. This is gonna kind of take the harsh bite off the garlic, but it's not like a very, very cooked flavor, because this is like fresh and raw and quick and easy. Once it starts to get that warm, like garlic bread smell instead of raw garlic smell, that's when you know you're good. And I feel like we're there. So I'm gonna add my tomato now, and we're gonna bring this up to a simmer. And it looks really like liquidy and loose, but it's not gonna be like a thick cooked pomodoro, but it is gonna tighten up once we add our cheese. So let's give this a taste. I actually don't think it needs any more salt. So the key to emulsifying anything, whether it's like a mayonnaise, a vinaigrette, or a pasta sauce like this, besides emulsifiers like, you know, egg yolk and garlic's an emulsifier, besides like physical emulsifiers like that, a lot of emulsification is about stirring and vigorous bubbling and just like an action, like shaking a vinaigrette, that emulsifies it. I'm gonna let it all come to an active simmer and then add half the cheese and keep stirring vigorously. The key to stirring like really vigorously and not making a mess is go for like small tight circles. You're gonna be like, you're telling me how to stir, but there is something to stirring. Small tight circles, that keeps you from splashing all over town. And it also, with something like spaghetti, if you just swirl around the pot like that, see how it's just like one big nest and nothing's really happening? So you really want to get in there. The small tight circles help break things up. We're gonna add half our cheese to this and continue stirring. Once the tomato came up to a simmer, I'm gonna turn off the heat, just keep stirring really vigorously, and it's gonna kind of give the pasta some time to absorb the sauce, and the cheese is gonna emulsify into it. Let me see, I'm gonna just taste this, see where the texture of the pasta's at. We still have a little bite in the core, teeny tiny, but it's cooked through. So I'm gonna finish up with the rest of my cheese and some basil, and that's it. We did it. It's just that easy. A really fresh, easy grated tomato sauce. Let's dig in. I heard that you're not supposed to do the spoon thing, that Italians don't do it, but I like it especially for this because this is such like a brothy, saucy pasta. It's really surprising because it's very, very simple. It doesn't look like much at all, but because we started with a really good tomato, we treated it very simply and made sure that our pasta was cooked properly. It's actually super flavorful, very savory, really satisfying, and it was done before I could even handle it. This was so fast. Look at how sweaty I am. You can make this. Next pasta, we're gonna make a simple carbonara. This recipe is by Ian Fisher, adapted from Andrew Carmelini. Carbonara has a cured pork, eggs, and cheese. So it's kind of like bacon, egg, and cheese, but with pasta. We're gonna get started by heating up our pasta water. We wanna bring this up to a boil. This carbonara recipe relies on finishing the eggs in a warm bowl to prevent it from overcooking. It's like kind of foolproofing it for the home cook. So we've got our hot boiling water. We're gonna add some to this metal bowl to get the bowl really nice and warm. And you know, the bowl is gonna get hot, so I'm gonna put it down and do this. You know, I've done this before where you pour hot water in a bowl and then before you know it, you're like, oh God, that bowl's really hot. So we're gonna set this aside for after our pasta is cooked. We're gonna season up our pasta water. I like a salty pasta, but you do you. The salt from the guanciale and the pecorino isn't overkill for me. So let's get in here and taste it. Excellent. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna use 12 ounces of pasta, and I'm gonna give it a stir now and again, just in the beginning until we get it back up to a vigorous boil. Now, in the meantime, I'm gonna dice up my guanciale. Guanciale is a cured pork product. It's kind of like bacon, but not smoked. So it's gonna be a little bit more porky and a little bit more funky. If you can't find it, I think bacon is totally acceptable substitute. Maybe just don't tell the Italians. So dicing up guanciale, it is helpful to have a sharp knife, but if you don't have a sharp knife, you can also just give this a quick freeze and it'll be a lot easier to work with. Now we're gonna let our pan heat up. And in the meantime, I'm gonna whisk up my eggs. Here I've got a couple of eggs and a couple of yolks. This is gonna be very rich with a big pinch of salt. And I like to whisk my eggs up first before I add the cheese. It's good to whisk everything up first because you want it to come together very quickly once it hits the heat. I hate when people don't properly whisk up their eggs and you just have like a little piece of snotty white. Or then when you mix that in with your pasta, you're gonna have like a little hard bit of white. And all you had to do was mix for just like 1 second longer. Okay, so now here we're gonna add our grated Parm and Pecorino that we grated on those tiny holes of the box grater. I like a lot of pepper in my carbonara. And I also I like my carbonara a little bit spicy, so I personally like to toast it in the skillet before I add the guanciale. But you know, this is like, there's so many ways you can do this. By adding the pepper into the eggs right now, it's gonna be a bit more like mild. And this is gonna be the key to the sauce. These creamy eggs, that properly grated cheese, those bonus yolks. It's gonna be very, very rich. And what's great is, maybe you don't always have the guanciale around, but you definitely usually have eggs and cheese. And I've made this without the guanciale pretty often. I'll just sub in this is not authentic at all, but I'll just add some frozen peas. It's actually quite delicious. And you cook everything exactly the same way. My pan's warmed up a bit. I'm gonna add olive oil to this skillet and get our guanciale a little bit crisp. You don't wanna be left with just a skillet of fat and then just teeny tiny nuggets of crunchy. We wanna go at kind of a moderate temperature so we get a little bit of color on the outside and we still get a little chewy bite of guanciale. Some of the fat's rendering out, but not all of it. I'm turning off my guanciale. I like where it's at. Everybody's brown. We still have nice meaty pieces. It's not fully rendered. I didn't do a great job chopping that up. It'll be okay. It's still gonna be delicious. See, if I can terribly cut this guanciale and still make a delicious carbonara, you can too. So our pasta is pretty close. It's all about, we're getting ready now. Things are gonna move quickly when our pasta gets there. I've got my cup ready to evacuate a little pasta water. We're gonna need it to help loosen things up because this is gonna be a bit tight and a bit creamy. I'm gonna dump the hot water from the bowl and dry it out. It's gonna be nice and warm and ready for mixing this pasta up. I'm happy with where we're at with that. I'm gonna drain my pasta and we're gonna go right into the guanciale skillet. Oh my gosh, I threw out some pasta water. No!
Wait, I thought you got some.
I forgot to scoop it.
Oh.
But it'll be fine. We'll talk about it. Okay, so our pasta is going into our pan with the guanciale. We're gonna toss it around just to get it nicely coated in that fat. And I totally forgot to save my pasta water. But you know what? The truth is, hot water will be fine. Pasta water is great, it's starchy and it helps a bit, but so is pasta. Pasta is also starchy. I do this all the time. I very often forget my pasta water. And as long as your water is really hot, you're gonna be okay. So this is nice and coated in our fat. We're gonna go into this warm bowl. Now you gotta move quickly. That's why we pre-scrambled our eggs and mixed up our cheese because we wanna be able to cook these eggs with the residual heat from the pasta. It's very important to be vigorous at this point. Our pasta is al dente, so it will not break. And there's hot water to the rescue. So if you did what I did and just forgot to save your pasta water, hopefully you have someone offset to quickly hand you some hot water. Now you have to remember, as soon as it hits the plate, it's gonna tighten up even more. So before you hit the plate, you want it to be a little bit looser than you want your final pasta. The key to making sure that it's really good when it hits the plate is when you think it's perfect, I add a little bit more water. So this is exactly how I would want to eat it. So I'm just gonna add another tablespoon to make sure that it stays like this when it hits the plate. Let's dig in. Saucy, glossy. Delightful. The pasta has the perfect texture. It got there for us just like in this bowl while we were mixing. Still a little bit of bite, nice bit of chew. Every strand is like individual and coated in that glossy sauce. And you get a little porkiness, but it's not really about the pork. It's more about the cheese. And it's so fast. And if you don't eat pork, just leave it out. It'll still be amazing. We're gonna offend a lot of the world right now. This isn't a real thing. This is something my mom made all the time because we just always had spaghetti and we always had a lot of Asian ingredients, you know, like soy and vinegar and ginger and garlic. So she just put the things she had together. So I got my pot of water coming up to a boil, and in the meantime, I'm gonna sear my chicken. I've got a Dutch oven here because I want to get really nice browning on my chicken. While my pan heats up, I'm going to pat my chicken dry because we want good color. And we've talked about this before. The enemy of brown is wet. We're using boneless, skinless chicken thighs just because they cook up really quickly and also stay pretty moist no matter what you do to them. But you can use any protein you want here. This is a good place for a ground meat if you want. If you're more of a breast person, go for that. Season in both sides. I also really like this recipe because we're gonna feed a lot of people without a whole lot. So it's just a little bit of chicken, a bunch of frozen vegetables, and pasta. So now I'm gonna go in with my olive oil. I wouldn't do butter here. Butter's gonna burn. And once we see a little shimmery, we're gonna add our chicken thighs. And we're gonna get it really nice and golden. There's kind of a lot of oil in here, but that is intentional because we really wanna coat our pasta really well. And by cooking the chicken in the fat, we're immediately flavoring the oil with the chicken. Chicken's gonna get really brown and golden, so that's also gonna like add that fond. Fond is when you get those really nice caramelized brown bits on the bottom of your pan. So you know the chicken is ready to flip. It will tell you when it wants to flip. When it easily releases from the pan, it's ready to go. Since we preheated our pan, we know it will talk to us. If you drop chicken into a cold pan, even if you let it go, just cook forever and get really brown, sometimes it'll still stick. So the combo of preheating, letting it stay put until it's brown, will make sure that it's not gonna stick. The reason we're not going for like a proper, true, authentic stir-fry noodle is a couple reasons. You know, you might not have noodles. Growing up, we didn't always have noodles, but we always had spaghetti. And then number two, for a real authentic stir fry, you do need to use a wok, which isn't something that everyone has. And more importantly, you do need a gas flame for a wok to work. This is a great way to kind of get that same vibe. That's why using a heavy bottomed pot is really vital because it's going to transfer a lot of heat the same way like a wok does. Oh yeah, we got brown. So the first side takes a lot longer to get it really nice and brown. You're kind of cooking it almost 3/4 of the way through. And that's like a really good technique for any kind of protein where you want one really crispy side. So I do this for duck or fish where you want crispy skin. So our water is boiling and we're gonna salt this very, very heavily, just like before. So you can see we got really good color on the first side, less so on the second, but that's okay. That's like a sacrifice side. And now we have these really nice brown bits on the bottom of our pan that's gonna add a lot of depth and richness and flavor to this like really simple dish. Right into this pot, I'm gonna add some scallions, ginger, and garlic. We're cooking this at medium until we want our scallions to get nice and soft. You're gonna smell that garlic and ginger, and it doesn't take too long. We're developing even more fond. Look at how much golden, delicious fond we have. And we're gonna deglaze this baby with frozen mixed vegetables. I grew up on frozen vegetables. My mom worked full time. Oftentimes the only vegetables we had were frozen. And the moisture from those veggies is gonna help us scrape up the bottom of the pot and really deglaze everything that's going on here. I'm actually gonna switch to a wooden spoon because it really helps you get in there and scrape up every single bit of that brown crusty goodness. And we're gonna cook this until the veggies kind of frizzle in the fat. Because you know, frozen vegetables, they could be a little bit bland, but we're gonna give them some love and they're gonna have so much flavor. Now let's check our pasta. Should be pretty close. Now this pasta, I don't really want this al dente. I want it to be at the level I want it to be for eating. Right now the pasta's al dente. I want to take it just like another minute. We're gonna run this under cool water to halt the cooking so it doesn't get too mushy when we toss it with everything. So now that my chicken is like slightly cooled, I'm gonna cut it into bite-sized pieces. Now I've got some really good sizzling action there, so I'm gonna add my sesame seeds to kind of toast up in that fat. I'm happy with where my pasta's at, so let's drain and rinse. If you're making a pasta where you want an emulsified sauce, like cacio e pepe or carbonara, you never, ever, ever rinse your pasta because you need those exterior starches to get it like glossy and emulsified. But this is totally different. We want to make sure our pasta stays nice and separate and doesn't overcook, which is why we're rinsing. So that's why it's important to remember that there's no like hard and fast rules with cooking. Anytime someone tells you you should never do something, don't listen to them. So I'm tossing this in this fat just to get it evenly coated so we got no clumpy pasta. Okay, so now everybody's join in the pot. We're gonna add our chicken back in here. We're gonna season this up with a little bit of vinegar, rice wine vinegar, a little bit of soy sauce, and some honey for sweetness. And we're just gonna stir and toss until it's all coated. And there you go. Okay, should we plate her up? No fancy twirls here. This is not a fancy twirl pasta. I'm sorry to all the food stylists out there. This is such a great recipe because we just stretched a lot of ingredients. A couple of final garnishes. When I chopped up some scallions, I held back on a little just to give us a little pop of color. And now, to really, really hammer home how this is not authentic to anywhere except my home. My favorite way to finish this is with a little bit of ketchup. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. This is how we had it growing up. I come from a big ketchup family. And just like that, wow. I would take this to school cold in the lunchbox, and whenever I had this, I was the most popular kid. I could trade this for anything. I'd trade this for chocolate croissants, for spam musubi, for homemade tofu. Like, this is kids love this. I'm gonna have even more ketchup. It still has that perfect texture, not mushy, not al dente. It's exactly where we want it to be. Everything's coated in that really flavorful ginger, scallion, garlic, chicken fond fat. And then you get like little bites of the tender chicken. Go make this, go offend the world. It's late at night, you want a snack, you want some easy mac and cheese. This is what I make, and I don't want to measure anything, and I want to use up all the random pasta I have because I've been making all these 12-ounce recipes. This is the best way to make mac and cheese, and what's great is it's very easy, and I think it is also the best mac and cheese. It rarely happens when the easiest thing is also the best. I'm gonna go with think about how much mac and cheese you feel like eating. Big bowl, medium bowl, little bowl. We've had a lot of pasta, so I'm going for a medium bowl. You want to do about equal parts milk and water, and we're going to cook our pasta right into the milk, and it's going to thicken the milk from all the starches in there. We're not going to drain this pasta. It's going to cook in this combo of milk and water. It's going to become the sauce. So we want to season it lightly now. We're not going super salty. We want to season it the way we want our final dish to taste. You can jazz it up with dry mustard, a little bit of paprika, garlic powder, whatever you feel like mac and cheese in. We're gonna adjust as we go, so you don't really have to stress out about anything. So I'm gonna make this with odds and ends, right? You got random handful of this, handful of that. The way we're gonna make that all come together into one delicious mac and cheese is you're gonna add your pasta in stages. Penne is the thickest one we have here. I'm gonna add, oh God, splash. I'm gonna start with my penne and give it a head start. We're on medium heat here, and we're gonna let that go for a minute. Then we'll add our fusilli, give it another minute. And then by the time we get to our spaghetti and macaroni, it'll all cook kind of at the same time. And also remember, it doesn't matter that much because it's mac and cheese. We don't need perfectly al dente noodles here. The main thing, only real trick here is you gotta keep stirring, otherwise it's gonna scorch. Now while I'm stirring, let's talk about the cheese. As this pasta cooks in the milk and water, the milk is gonna reduce and the starches from the pasta are gonna slough off into the milk, and it's gonna get thickened and creamy just like a bechamel. So then to that, you can really add any kind of cheese you want. Anything you've got, anything that'll melt. I wouldn't use something very wet, like feta or mozzarella. Might make your sauce a little bit wet, but really like anything else goes. Gouda, Parm, Munster, Boursin. This is a great way to use up all your pasta bits, but also a great place to use up any like random cheese bits. Throw it all together. My favorite for like a classic vibe, here we have a combo of American and cheddar. Penne's had a minute. Let's go in with the fusilli. Fusilli. Don't stress out too much about how much pasta's in there. If you end up with too much pasta and not enough liquid, you can just add more liquid. If you end up with too much liquid and not enough pasta, scoop out some of the liquid. It's gonna be fine. Now that we're at like a rolling boil, now's a good time to add the smaller pastas. If you're just making this with broken spaghetti or macaroni, I would wait for it to fully come to a boil because those pastas cook so fast and it'll just be complete like mouchade. You don't want that. So in with our macaroni, the classic shape. The classic. Did you know that back in the day, all pasta was called macaroni? I'm gonna break up some spaghetti. Some spaghetti. I want this to be spoonable. And you do break spaghetti sometimes for fideos. And we're just gonna keep stirring and cooking and it's gonna be amazing. This is one of those things that like, it's kind of better to add more milk as you go. Because you can always add more milk, but it's a little bit harder to take it away. We'll go a little harder on the pasta than on the milk. And then once you get to the desired doneness of pasta, you can add a little bit more milk to loosen it up to give you that creamy sauce. We're gonna taste the penne, the sturdiest of the nudes. See where it's at. Needs another minute and needs more salt. And you can really see it's starting to look like a bechamel. You're gonna think you messed up because you're gonna be like, wow, it's just like milk and hard pasta. And then it just happens for you. You just have to believe. It's really looking thick now. Really creamy. Transformation. At this point when it's this creamy, you can scorch quite easily. So you want to stay close. You want to keep stirring. Okay, everybody's tender. Reducing the heat. I might need to add more milk, but before I add milk, I'm going to go in with my cheese. And then after adding the cheese, if it looks a little tight, we'll go back with milk. You can just keep going back and forth. So I'm going to start with my American and just eyeball the cheese, add it to taste, and stir vigorously. So we're over low heat and we're stirring vigorously to emulsify that cheese. At this point, you're kind of thinking about it like fondue. You want to add your cheese one handful at a time. If you add too much at once, it's gonna like cool down everything and you're gonna end up with it just not fully melting. It's gonna be kind of clumpy. Now we're gonna go in with our cheddar, one big handful. This is exactly how you make fondue, except it would be emulsified into wine. You add a handful at a time, you stir vigorously, and you wait for it to melt before you add the next handful. We're over low heat the whole time. I'm gonna pull it off heat and give it a taste, see if I want more cheese. We did it. I like this actually more than bechamel. I think it's really creamy and rich, and I love that you don't have like the flour kind of getting in the way of the flavor. The combo of American cheese and cheddar really tastes like boxed mac and cheese, but like so much better. Make this when you're sober, you're drunk, you're lazy, you got bits of pasta, bits of cheese, or you just want a really creamy, delicious mac and cheese. I hope you feel a little bit more confident to go forth and spaghetti. Huh? If you can boil water, you can also probably cook something till al dente, emulsify, stir fry kind of mac and cheese. And if you want any of these recipes, head over to nytcooking.com. And if you've missed some of our other episodes, check them out on YouTube.